Hello, Cornerstone Church. Pastor Phil here, coming to you on day 2 of our 21 days of prayer and fasting. And the theme for day 2 is submit to the one who said, follow me. The text for today is Luke chapter 5, 27 through 32. And in the additional scriptures, you also have Psalm 139 as well. But in Luke chapter 5, 27 through 32, you have the account of Levi, otherwise known as Matthew, who is the tax collector, and Jesus' call on his life. And when you read that passage, you see Jesus called, and it says that Levi left everything and followed him. And that's the theme for the day, that Jesus, as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, has the authority to call us, and our response needs to be to follow him. Whatever he may lead us into, however he may lead us, our response is to follow him. That's the response of obedience, and that's the only response that we have available to us. I mean, obviously, we can disobey the Lord, but I certainly hope that none of us would do that, at least in any dramatic way. Our goal in life is to learn how to obey God at every point and follow his leading in every circumstance in our lives. And so that is the theme for the day. That's what we see in Levi or Matthew in Luke chapter 5. And I want to encourage that. We need to see all the ways in which God calls us to follow him. So there's certainly the initial act of surrendering our lives to him. We looked at that a little bit yesterday, and the theme of submission. We're going to just look at that same theme again today. But God calls us, and our response needs to be to lay down everything. To lay down everything in our lives and to follow him. That's what Jesus' requirement is. When he talks about, if anyone comes after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. That's what he's talking about. Denying himself means laying down everything in our lives and following him, going in whatever direction he tells us to go in, no matter how different it may be from the direction that we would choose in our lives. So Dana Olson has thoughts in relation to that. He talks about how Levi was a tax collector, which meant that he was an outcast in Jewish society, and yet Jesus called him. The Jews would have considered him the worst kind of sinner. He was a traitor to the nation. So he was a sinner of the highest order. And yet that's who Jesus called to be in his entourage, in among his closest followers, those that he designated as apostles. Matthew was one of the 12. And so that's an encouragement to us in the sense that our sin does not disqualify us from following Jesus. We just have to obey him. The only thing that would disqualify us is our own refusal to accept his call, refusal to follow where he leads us. But unless we disqualify ourselves, nothing in our background will disqualify us. Paul refers to himself as the chief of sinners, and yet he knew his own calling before the Lord. So we have not to worry about our own background. If he calls someone like Matthew, he can certainly call someone like us. There's another dynamic in this passage that Dana Olson doesn't make a big deal about, but I preached about this some time ago. One of the things that you see in Matthew, when he responds to Jesus, the first thing he does is he has a dinner at his house in Jesus' honor. And he invites all of his tax collector friends to come and meet Jesus. That's such a powerful example to us. When Jesus calls us, he wants us to bring all of our family, all of our friends, all of our neighbors, all of our co-workers with us when we follow him. And so we should think about ways in which we can try to introduce the people close to us to Jesus. That's what Matthew did when he threw that party. He was looking for a way. Sure, he wanted to honor Jesus, and that's a big deal, but look at who he invited. He invited all his tax collector friends. That's why the Pharisees were so upset. They say, why are you eating with tax collectors and sinners? Because that's who Matthew invited, and that's a good thing. So when we follow Jesus, we also have to think about how we can encourage others, especially people that don't know him, to follow him as well. The prayer for today is similar to the prayer from yesterday. It's a prayer of submission, but it's specifically to the lordship of Jesus Christ. He says, Father in heaven, today I acknowledge Jesus Christ is my master. He's my king. If you've never prayed that prayer in your life, I really want to encourage you to pray it today. We need to make Jesus the Lord of our lives. That's what it means, again, to be born again. It means to surrender to him. And we have to surrender our lives to him. So I want to encourage you to pray that prayer if you've never prayed it before. If you have prayed it before, if you've surrendered your life to him, if you've made Jesus the Lord of your life, then pray it again in relation to this day. Lord, I submit myself to you again this day. I submit myself to you anew this day. I really want to follow where you lead. So Lord, help me to do that. And by God's grace, we will be able to follow. He wants to lead us. We need to follow. So I pray for strength and guidance for all of us as we try to walk with the Lord. Have a blessed day following Jesus, and may God's grace surround you in every way. In Jesus' name.